Hello everyone. Today I will recap you a movie titled Unbreakable. So make some tea and we'll start. Philadelphia 1961. Dr. Madison comes to the department store where the woman gave birth to a boy named Elijah. The doctor says he hasn't encountered anything like that. The boy was born with fractured arms and legs. Our time. David Dunn, the main character of the film, is traveling on a train to Philadelphia. A woman sits down to him. He takes off his wedding ring. They talk and it turns out that the girl is a sports agent, going to Philadelphia for work. The girl's name is Kelly. David asks if Kelly will go to Philadelphia for a long time. Kelly sees this as a hint of intimacy and sits down from David. The train is starting to shake. The boy is watching TV. He switches the channels and comes across a report about a train crash. After checking the record on the sticker, he finds out that this is the train in which his father was driving. David wakes up in the hospital. The doctor reports that almost all 132 passengers of the train died, except for David and another passenger, who has many fractures and who is likely to die soon, too. David is completely healthy, moreover, there is no scratch on him. He is met by his son and wife from the hospital. At home, David says he didn't get a job in New York, but he'll still move there later. Based on the conversation and the fact that they sleep in different beds, it becomes clear that David and his wife Audrey are not on very good terms. David visited the funeral service of the victims of the disaster. When he returned to the car, he found a letter under the janitor with the text, "How many days have you been sick in your whole life?" David asks for information about how many times he took sick leave at his work. He works in the security service at the stadium. The bosses believe that David hinted that he wants an increase, because David never took sick leave during his work. At home, he tries to ask his wife if he has been sick at least once during their relationship. Audrey can't remember and attributes it to her fatigue. West Philadelphia. 1974, Elijah's mother says he shouldn't stay at home, that it won't make his life safer. He answers his mother that at school he was nicknamed Mr. Glass because he is as fragile as glass. Elijah's mother makes him go outside. She bought him a gift and left it on a bench on the other side of the street. The gift box contains a comic book. We are coming back to our time. Adult Elijah knows about the image from the same comic book. He's going to sell this image. But when the buyer says he buys it for his son, Elijah asks the buyer to leave and refuses to sell him the image. David came to Elijah's gallery with his son. It was Elijah who left a letter to David. Joseph, David's son, says that David was injured. He got into a car accident after which he could no longer play football. Elijah is upset and says it's a discrepancy. Elijah says that he has been fond of comics all his life and believes that this is one of the oldest types of transmitting information about what a person later passed through a commercial machine experienced. Elijah has long been looking for a man with supernatural abilities, followed the news and was looking for survivors of disasters, of which there have been many in the city recently. Hearing that David was the only survivor of the train crash, he decided that he was the one he needed. Elijah reports that he has a genetic defect because of which he has very fragile bones. He believes that if he lives at one end of the spectrum, there may be a person who lives in the other, that is, he is not susceptible to disease or injuries. David asks his son to pour water out of the glass to stay alone with Elijah. David doesn't believe Elijah and considers him a fraudster. He's leaving. At home, David in the closet looks at old newspaper clippings about his football team. When he took out the newspapers, he shifted the revolver wrapped in a rag. He finds a clipping about the accident in which he was injured. His wife knocks on the door and says she wants to try to start all over again. Elijah comes to work with David and asks why he works in security. It seems curious to him. There's a crush at the stadium in front of the entrance. David felt that a man from the crowd had a weapon and was right. Late in the conversation, he assumes that he had a silver gun with a black handle. Elijah says that David has the gift of feeling dangerous people. Elijah also asks if anyone else got into that car accident, and David replies that his wife got into it with him. Elijah gets into the car and sees in the rearview mirror a man trying to go to the stadium with weapons. He starts chasing him but falls down the stairs, breaking a lot of bones. When he lies and loses consciousness, he sees that a man has a silver gun with a black handle in his back pocket. David comes to the house by bus and sees his son playing football. His mother forbids him to play football, but David says he won't tell her about it. David refuses his son's request to play football with them, citing the fact that he needs to train. During training, David squeezes 250 pounds from his chest. And then 270. David understands that he has superhuman strength after he raised 350 pounds, which is about 160 kilograms. Joseph watches it and admires his father. Elijah is in a hospital with multiple fractures. The doctor says he will spend the next months in a wheelchair. His physiotherapist is David, Audrey's wife. During the conversation, Audrey learns that David and Elijah know each other. Elijah tells Audrey that he has a theory that some people have supernatural abilities, and David is one of these people. At the same time, David at work, with the help of his feelings, finds a drug dealer, but finds nothing in his pockets. He finds out that something happened to his son and comes to school. David talks to a woman who remembers him and says that David was badly injured during his school years. He lay at the bottom of the pool for 5 minutes, and when he was pulled out, he didn't breathe anymore. The son says he tried to protect the girl from the guys who tried to get into her locker room. Joseph tells his father that he's not an ordinary person, but David denies it. Upon returning home, David and Audrey talk about Elijah. Audrey says he's out of reality. At this time, Joseph puts a gun on the table and says that he will prove that his father is not an ordinary person, and for this he will shoot him. David assumes that the gun is not loaded, but Joseph says that he found the cartridges in the cup in which David left them. David persuades Joseph not to shoot, saying that the famous story at their school about a boy who almost drowned is a story about himself. Elijah is talking to David in his studio. He reports that that guy really had a silver gun with a black handle at the stadium. David denies his superpowers and tells Elijah about a childhood case when he almost drowned. David asks Elijah to lag behind him and his family. Elijah is upset. He sits in a comic book store and does not react to the seller's comments that the store is closing. When the seller tries to roll it out, the Elijah prevents it from doing so. When the seller tries to call the police, Elijah chooses a comic and asks how much it costs. David and Audrey decide to get out to a restaurant to establish a relationship. They don't know if it's possible to leave Joseph with a nanny, but they decide that they can still do it. David and his wife are in a restaurant. Audrey asks when he suspected that they wouldn't get well. David says he had a terrible dream and didn't wake Audrey up. This was the first time. She asks if he deliberately avoids them with Joseph. David says something is wrong with him. He also says that now every time he wakes up, he is attacked by melancholy. When they returned, the nanny reported that David was being hired in New York and there was another call that remained on the answering machine. David is listening to the message on the answering machine. Elijah talks about the weaknesses that all superheroes have and says that he and David have a similar reaction to water. Water is David's weakness. David comes to an abandoned warehouse in heavy rain. There he remembers the accident. As a result of the accident, Audrey found herself under the car and David lifted the car and took it out of there. David calls Elijah and says that he was not injured in the accident. Elijah tells David to go to a crowded place. In the crowd, David feels people who committed crimes. He finds the man who committed the murder and begins to pursue him. He tracks the killer home and follows him. David sees the corpse and tries not to make any noise. He's inspecting the house. Detects a bound boy and a girl and frees them. In another room, he finds a dead woman tied to the battery. David stands on the windowsill and a murderer appears behind his back. He puts David out of the window and he finds himself on a tarpaulin covering the pool. David begins to drown and tries to get out, getting even more confused in the tarpaulin. As a result, he manages to grab an oblong object that the rescued children handed him out and gets out. David approaches the killer from behind and begins to strangle him. He tries to resist, push David with his back against the wall, beat him with his elbows. David manages to strangle the criminal. He unleashes a woman and she falls to the floor. David returns home and takes Audrey to his bed. She wakes up. David says he had a nightmare. Audrey replies that it's over. Morning. Joseph wakes up and goes to the kitchen. Audrey and David are in the kitchen. Audrey offers pancakes to Joseph. David hands his son a newspaper that says about the rescue of 2 children by some unknown. Joseph looks at his father and he nods to him and says he was right. David makes a gesture hinting that it's better not to tell his mother about it. David comes to the exhibition in the Elijah Gallery. There he meets a woman who talks about the picture and two different types of villains. There are villains who fight by force, villains are fighters. And there is a brilliant villain, an opponent based on the power of the mind. It turns out that this woman is Elijah's mother. She informs her son that David has come. They leave to talk. Elijah asks if David was attacked by melancholy in the morning. He answers no. Elijah offers David to shake hands. During the touch, David sees that it was Elijah who committed all the terrorist attacks, including the train crash. David is shocked by what he saw. Elijah asks, "What's the scariest thing in the world?" He answers his question himself, saying that the worst thing is when you can't find your place, you don't understand why you were born. He says he completely lost hope. David says Elijah killed people. Elijah says it was all in order to find David. David is broken and leaves. Elijah screams after the fact that it's easy to identify the villain in the comics. He is always the opposite of the main character. And often they are even friends. David contacted the police and its employees found evidence of 3 terrorist acts in the gallery. Elijah Price went to an institution for mentally ill criminals.